How exactly does one make a dream game? It's 2025. The year where a bunch of extremely weird stuff was supposed to happen but didn't. Personally, this is the year of me attempting to develop my dream game and maybe make some actual progress in my life, just like every other year. See, I'm a university student, which is simply a professional way of saying I'm broke and unemployed, and quite aimless at the moment actually. I haven't been doing as well as I'd like to with school, and I didn't really see any career paths coming out of it. Fortunately, it also happens to have a few years of game development experience under my belt. I have been developing games with Unity mostly as a hobbyist since the cursed lockdown era in 2020, but I haven't really been able to work on anything elaborate for a number of reasons, which are either dumb or just sad. Mostly because I believe that if I wanted to develop something as elaborate as my dream game, I needed a cutting-edge RTX 9020 with 512 gigs of RAM and a 96-core processor. I was like 15, so can't really blame me. But then out of nowhere, 5 years passed by. So much time had gone and I still didn't have my $20,000 computer. I have a beard now. So this year, I decided to do things differently, just like I decided to do every other year. Sure, it doesn't help that I'd be using a $60 computer for this, and it certainly doesn't help that I have zero money for development. But you know what they say, trying and failing is a perfectly valid excuse for any form of failure at all, as long as you tried. So what exactly is the dream game of mine? See, I like survival games a lot, so much so that in 2022 I was working on a game called Recraft. Recraft was a survival game where the goal was to survive for as long as possible. I wasn't able to complete the game because my computer at the time combusted from voltage overload. It literally burst into flames. Story for another YouTube video, maybe. Anyways, after losing that game, I wanted to develop it again since I really liked the core idea. But as the years passed by, I kept rebuilding the idea and plot of how I wanted the game to turn out, so much so that it became an entirely different game. Basically, the game is set in the year 2265, about 240 years into the future. In this future, humanity was able to perfect AGI up to the point where it develops consciousness. Then, for whatever reason, it decides to enslave humanity. Definitely an original storyline that hasn't been told 1,000 fucking times already. Anyways, everybody on Earth gets enslaved except you, the player, because you were conveniently placed in a cryogenic chamber far away from civilization by the government for multiple accounts of committing tax fraud. Or something like that, maybe, I don't know. I've never been the best storyteller anyways, so you get what you get. The game's world is one single giant continent with a large city near the center, where the entire human civilization resides for some reason, and also where the AI is being hosted. You, the player, is spawned somewhere close to the shore at random. Your main objective is to make it to the city and defeat this tyrant AGI boss. You'll have to gather resources, build and program contraptions, fight enemies and more, all while having to survive an unforgiving terrain that goes on for miles on end. The game idea is inspired by a lot of my favorite indie games, including Minecraft, Stardew Valley, and even some really cool games in development, like Astoria and Bontra Setting, which you should definitely check out. So, now what? Oh man. Well, as all my projects begin, the first thing I did was to open up my favorite game engine. Now, I needed to figure out how I wanted the structure of the island to be. My plan was to have the world be randomly generated by the computer, using a number as a seed, which would be used to generate a unique world. This means that the same seed would generate the same world every time, while a different seed would generate a different world, just like in games like Minecraft and No Man's Sky. But how do I actually achieve this? The first idea I got was to create a grid of points like so, which would be used to generate a 3D model of the island. Next, I'll use a 2D noise map to determine how high or low each point should be, where black is the lowest point and white is the highest point, to create the appearance of hills and the normal landmarks the terrain should have. So, I did that. By using this section of C# text, I was able to calculate a grid of points and render a flat square. Next, we needed to create the 2D noise map, which the points would reference its height position from. Now, to create the noise map itself, I'll need, well, noise. There are many genders of noise out there, and while I can't introduce you to all of them, I can certainly name a few. The most basic one being random noise, which as its name implies, is a type of noise that has a pseudo-random arrangement of values and no coherency to it. This clearly won't work for our island, so we would have to choose a better noise algorithm. Parallel noise is a different type of noise that uses an algorithm to determine its values depending on where on the noise texture we are sampling from, to create more coherent gradient noise that transitions well between dark areas and light areas. I don't completely understand how it works, but it's isolated logic. I don't need to understand how it works. So to create the noise map for our grid of points, I'll need multiple octaves of parallel noise, with each iteration having a higher frequency and lower amplitude. Applying that to our island gives us, well, this. It's clearly still a work in progress. Now, there was just one small problem I had with the terrain, and no, it wasn't the horrendous choice of colors. The terrain looked the same everywhere, and frankly, it looked kind of boring, which made it worse. Luckily, I came across this YouTube video by Henrik, a former Mojang developer. I highly recommend this video to all programmers and non-programmers alike, due to how interesting it is. In this video, he talks about the idea of combining noise maps with spline points to determine continentalness, erosion levels, peaks and valleys, and even temperature, humidity and rainfall, which obviously creates even more varying and interesting terrain generation. The concept was very straightforward, and as such I was able to implement it in my own game. This made the terrain look much better. Kinda. Now this was looking good, but I still had one tiny problem with it. First off, if somehow you weren't paying attention, this is still just a grid of points with varying elevation. That means we can only get hills and valleys, but we can't get overhangs, caves, and random floating rocks that just makes everything better, which I really wanted in the game. Secondly, another problem of mine was that this terrain wasn't exactly quantifiable. What does that mean? See, the terrain didn't have any definite unit of abstract measurements, so you could have the terrain scaled up or down relative to the player and still have it look exactly the same, which I did not like. It also meant that mechanics like digging and excavating terrain wasn't really possible. So I decided to scrap this method and go for another alternative. I woke up this morning around 12:16 PM and the first thing that came to my mind was voxels. Basically, the new idea I came up with for the terrain generation was to use a bunch of connected cubes, which would fix both problems I had previously. So I did just that. Fortunately, this didn't sound all that difficult. First off, I attempted to render a single cube. This used up 24 vertices and 12 triangles. I thought this was fine, so I generated a 10 by 10 by 10 grid of cubes. Now this used up 24,000 vertices and 12,000 triangles. This here was a problem, simply because the model was using up to 1,000 times more vertices and triangles, even though it looked exactly like the single cube. We needed to optimize. The first problem with this unoptimized mesh is that all the faces of each and every cube was being rendered, even the faces of the cubes that we would never see. So we needed to write a new algorithm that would check if each face is next to another cube. If it is, then it will never be rendered. By using this C# text, I was able to get the number down from 24,000 vertices and 12,000 triangles down to just 3,600 vertices and 1,200 triangles. This was absolutely wonderful, but there was still one more optimization trick I wanted to apply. See, each cube face has 2 triangles, and each triangle has 3 vertices. That was a total of 6 vertices per face. However, since they are on the same 2-dimensional plane of existence, we can only use 4 vertices while forcing the 2 triangles to have 2 shared vertices. As you can probably imagine, this brings down the 3,600 vertices to 2,400, while the triangle count remained the same. Now that the mesh generation algorithm is fairly optimized, I attempted generating a 3-dimensional grid of cubes, with a 50% chance of each cube not existing. Looking pretty good, if you ask me. Now, it was time to use it for the terrain generation. With most of the difficult stuff taken care of, all I had to do was generate a 3-dimensional grid of cubes. Then by introducing the 2D noise map on the former terrain algorithm, we can determine how high the blocks would be. This was looking pretty good already, but the colors still looked rather horrendous. So I looked up the Minecraft stone texture as a placeholder, which means I would change it once I start designing my own art and stuff. Now, if you've not noticed before, the terrain is looking rather flat. This is because there was no shading around the corners of the cubes, which is a must-have for a more realistic 3D look. This unfortunately brings us to ambient occlusion is a computer graphics technique used to simulate the way objects in a scene blocks ambient light from reaching other objects. Essentially, it adds light shading to tight corners, making it look less flat. That's cool and all, but how do I implement it in my game? Luckily, Unity's universal render pipeline had a built-in screen space ambient occlusion algorithm, which does all the heavy lifting for me. So after upgrading the project to URP, making a bunch of changes and adding screen space ambient occlusion, it looks... this doesn't look very good. This doesn't look very good at all. So I totally scrapped the SSAO thing and decided to implement one myself. I went online and did some research on how light propagates around corners and why ambient occlusion isn't really a thing in the first place. Soon enough, I was able to create a model which I could base my algorithm on. Basically, imagine we had a square. This square represents the face of a cube. Now this square will be divided into 400 smaller units. Each unit will be a pixel, and each pixel will be given a shadow level. 1 being complete shadow and 0 being no shadow at all. So how do we determine the shadow level of each pixel? Now let's say the left edge of the face just so happens to be a corner in the terrain, and we want to determine what the shadow level of each pixel on the face would be. We will start with the first pixel and draw an imaginary circle around it. Next, we will calculate the area of the circle that is within the square and then divide it by the total area of the circle. The result of this will be our shadow level. We then go ahead to complete the rest of the pixels, which will give us our ambient occlusion shading. But there is still a problem. Any attempt to calculate all of this for every face in the terrain at runtime would pretty much combust any computer, even my imaginary $20,000 computer. So I tried to optimize. The first thing I thought of was to store every possible shading combination into a texture. Now if you notice, there are 8 different places a block could be, and each place could be in one of 2 states, block and no block. This gives us a total of 256 different combinations. So I generated all 256 different shade textures and then combined them to make one giant texture atlas. Next, I wrote an algorithm that will assign the right textures to all the existing faces on terrain. And finally, after days of no sleep, I was able to finally add ambient occlusion to the project. Just for visualizing difference, here is some terrain with and without the shading. Please tell me you can see it. Of course you can see it. You are not fucking blind. Also, I later added a slider to control the strength of the shading because my brother said it was looking too forced for some reason. Man, I swear to God. Now so far, I've been working on only the terrain. I wanted to work on something else for a change, like the water for example. It's literally just a big blue square. So I looked up a bunch of water shader tutorials on YouTube and went with this really cool one by Binary Luna. It made my water square have a more stylized look, which I really like. But there was a small problem with the depth color feed. For some reason, the shader was glitching out and rendering weird when I moved the camera too fast, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. Oddly, no one else seemed to have this problem with it in the tutorial that I followed for some reason. But it's okay, I'm sure a solution will turn up, probably. Next, I wanted to add the passage of time, which will also include a day-night cycle. It took me some time to work it out, but I finally figured out how I wanted it to be. In the game, 1 minute would be equal to 1 second in real life, which means a day in game is exactly 24 minutes. I love it when numbers round up like that, by the way, I really do. Anyways, the first day of the game will be dated 2265 March 1st, or whenever the spring equinox falls in the northern hemisphere of the earth, maybe. There will be 4 seasons, each lasting 3 months, which are spring, summer, autumn and ice season. A year will be made up of 12 months or 360 days, and each month will have 30 days. Yes, this does mean that February will be getting a 30th day. With this setup, a month in game is about 12 hours in real life, a season is about a day and a half, a year is 6 days, and weeks do not exist. So to actually implement all of this in my game, I'll start with a timer to keep track of how many seconds have gone since the beginning of the game. Then with a little bit of coding and math, I can use that to determine the current date and time in the game. Next, I wanted to add a day-night cycle to make the passage of time more visual, if you get what I mean. Of course you do. The first thing I did was to look up a shader tutorial to make a sky shader. I found this cool one by the game guy, and I was able to implement it into my game. Next, I made some color gradients which would determine the color of the sky at certain times of the day. I also made a giant sphere and made it glow, which would be the sun. It looked nice and everything, but I wasn't quite sure how to make it. Me fucking dumbass. I wasn't sure how to make the sun render behind everything. I even had to go through the entire Unity related article on the internet. That doesn't involve writing shaders, of course. After which I just started messing around with the Unity settings like a good developer always do. Okay, let's see. Render queue. Wait, I thought there was a render queue somewhere here. Opaque depth? Nope, that does not work. Maybe if I change this to debug mode. Ah, there we go. Alright. Wait, why is it changing back? Bro, change! Oh, that's actually a pretty sunset right there. I think I should use that as a thumbnail or something. Yeah, this will be a thumbnail. Alright. Depth priming. What the fuck is depth priming? Let me just disable that. I don't think that did anything. Oh wait, hold on. The water thing is fixed. Hey yo, the water thing is fixed. You're watching this and you are a Unity developer and you know what painfully obvious button to press. Please feel free to leave your comments in the comments below. Anyways, I made stars. It's basically just a white glowing sphere that I spawned 1,000 of in the sky. Inefficient, maybe, but it works and doesn't really bother me that much. Therefore it stays. Now everything we've done so far is looking good, but unfortunately that's all I have to talk about today, so I should probably just end the video right about here. Before I do that, I should probably talk about the future of my games. So like I said earlier, and like the video told you, this is my dream game. So here are my goals with it and what I plan to do exactly. The main goal is to have a version of the game out for early access on Steam by 2026, January 1st. This means that I'll have a whole year to complete the game. I'll also be dropping more devlogs like this in an attempt to grow a community. Hopefully, because I failed last time. Making these videos is pretty hard, however, and believe it or not, I've been planning out the structure of this video since November. Now, of course, this doesn't mean I'll be dropping a video once every 3 months. I just wanted to make a good first impression with this one. Hopefully I did. But still, making videos is very hard. So I'll be more active on the Everything app, hopefully, where I'll be dropping more frequent updates. Feel free to follow me there. Please. Anyways, that's all for today. Have a nice one. Also, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me. Thank you.